Have you ever wondered why the silence of a woman can possess such a potent, maddening power over a man? It is not merely the absence of sound, but the profound vacuum it creates. A chasm where words once resided, now replaced by an echoing void that compels a man to fill it, to interpret it, to desperately seek meaning in its profound emptiness. This is the agony of unsaid things, the torment of unspoken truths, and the insidious way a woman's silence can become a crucible for a man's deepest insecurities. The old stone house stood sentinel on the cliff, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the turbulent sea. Inside, the air hung heavy with an almost palpable quiet, broken only by the rhythmic whisper of waves against the rocks below. Elias, a man carved from a restless ambition that had once promised him the world, now found himself trapped within these walls, haunted by a silence far more profound than the ocean's roar. His wife, Elias, moved through their shared life like a ghost, her presence a constant, unsettling enigma. Their marriage, once a vibrant tapestry of shared dreams and whispered confessions, had unraveled thread by thread, leaving only the stark, chilling silence. Elias remembered the early days, when Alara's laughter had been the melody of his life, her voice a balm to his anxieties. Now her lips remained sealed, her gaze often distant, lost in a landscape he couldn't access. He would try, of course, at first with gentle inquiries, then with increasing desperation. "Is something wrong, my love?" he'd ask, his voice a tentative bridge across the growing chasm. Alara would offer a polite, almost imperceptible shake of her head, or a murmured, "I'm fine, Elias." But her eyes, those deep pools that once reflected his own longing, remained opaque, revealing nothing. This was not a silence born of contentment, but of a deeply entrenched pain, a wall erected brick by silent brick. Elias began to pace the grand halls, the silence amplifying his own thoughts until they roared in his ears. He replayed every conversation, every argument, searching for the precise moment when the light in her eyes had dimmed, when her voice had begun to recede into a whisper, then into nothingness. He attributed her quietude to a burgeoning resentment, a hidden judgment he couldn't decipher. His mind, fertile ground for self-doubt, began to cultivate a monstrous garden of accusations. "She must think I'm inadequate. She's disappointed. She's planning to leave." Each unspoken word from Alara became a chisel chipping away at Elias's carefully constructed ego. He remembered the grand architectural project he had poured his soul into, the one that had consumed his days and nights, leaving Alara often alone. He had returned, triumphant, expecting her adoration, only to find her more withdrawn, her silence already taking root. He had dismissed it then, blinded by his success, attributing it to her quiet nature. Now, in the stark reality of their fractured present, he saw the pattern. Her silence was a mirror reflecting his own perceived failings, an echo chamber for his insecurities. He tried to provoke a reaction, any reaction. He would recount his day in vivid detail, exaggerate minor triumphs, even invent fabricated slights from colleagues, hoping to elicit a spark of empathy, a flicker of concern. Nothing, just the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing, the subtle shift of her weight as she listened or didn't listen. The silence began to feel like a punishment, a deliberate withholding, a weapon forged in the crucible of her unspoken pain. One stormy evening, the wind howling around the house like a banshee, Elias confronted her. His voice, usually so controlled, cracked with a desperate urgency. "Why won't you speak to me, Alara? What have I done?" Her eyes, briefly, met his, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a flicker of something, a deep sadness that pierced his carefully constructed defenses. But then it was gone, replaced by the familiar veil of impassivity. "There's nothing to say, Elias," she finally uttered, her voice barely a whisper, yet resonating with the finality of a closing tomb. This response, or lack thereof, ignited a primal fear within him. He was losing her, not to another man, not to an argument, but to the suffocating embrace of her own unexpressed sorrow. His attempts to fill the silence became increasingly frantic. his behavior more erratic. He would pace, he would drink, he would shout at the walls. He sought solace in the company of others, but their laughter and conversation seemed hollow, incapable of dispelling the oppressive weight of Alara's unspoken words. The more he chased her, the further she retreated into the silent fortress she had built around herself. The true agony lay not in her refusal to speak, but in his inability to sit with the discomfort of the unknown, to face the possibility that her silence wasn't about him at all, but about her own journey through an unfathomable private grief. The more he projected his fears and insecurities onto her silence, the deeper he sank into a quagmire of his own making, unable to see the woman beyond his frantic interpretations. The archetype of the wounded anima often manifests in a woman who has retreated into a profound silence, not out of malice, but from a deep well of unacknowledged pain. This silence, for the man who encounters it, can become a terrifying void, mirroring his own unresolved shadow aspects. His need for external validation, his fear of abandonment, his unconscious desire to control. He projects onto her silence his deepest anxieties, believing her quietude is a direct indictment of his worth. To truly understand this dynamic, you must first turn inward, for the siren's secret is often a reflection of the unaddressed chaos within. You must cultivate the stoic discipline of accepting what is beyond your control, recognizing that another's inner landscape is not yours to navigate or fix. Instead of desperately trying to fill the silence with your own anxieties, create space for genuine connection. Cultivate a patient and empathetic presence. Offer the quiet understanding that asks for nothing in return, allowing her the safe harbor to eventually emerge from her sanctuary of silence. For within that stillness lies not a rejection of you, but perhaps a yearning for a love that simply sees her, without demanding she explain her quiet depths. You must remember that healing pain requires presence, not pressure. Allow yourself to be present with the discomfort, and in doing so, you may find the key to unlocking not only her truth but your own inner peace. Imagine this. You are a man adrift in a sea of unspoken expectations, the silent judgment of a woman becoming the very currents that pull you further from shore. This is the second common aspect of the siren's secret, the way a woman's silence, when perceived as judgment, can drive a man to destructive behaviors, twisting his sense of self-worth into an unrecognizable knot. It's the torment of the unseen critic, the unbearable weight of imagined disapproval that compels him to chase an ever-receding horizon of validation. In the bustling heart of Viridia, a city that pulsed with the relentless rhythm of ambition, lived Julian, a charismatic and outwardly successful architect. He designed shimmering skyscrapers and sprawling urban landscapes, his name synonymous with innovation. Yet, his private world was a stark contrast to his public triumphs, shadowed by the silent presence of his wife, Lyra. Lyra was a woman of ethereal beauty and profound introspection, her eyes often holding a depth that Julian, for all his architectural prowess, could never quite fathom. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of passionate declarations and shared artistic visions. But once married, a subtle shift began. Lyra, while never overtly critical, possessed an unnerving ability to simply observe. Her silence, initially interpreted by Julian as serene acceptance, slowly morphed into something far more unsettling. He'd come home, brimming with the day's achievements, eager to share the intricacies of a new design, the thrill of a successful presentation. Lyra would listen, her gaze steady, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. She would offer a simple, "That's wonderful, Julian," her tone utterly devoid of the effusive praise he secretly craved. This quiet lack of overt admiration, this absence of enthusiastic validation, began to gnaw at Julian. He started to interpret her calm demeanor as a silent evaluation, a silent critique. Does she think I'm not good enough? Is this not impressive to her? Does she see through my facade? His ego, accustomed to the constant applause of the world, began to shrivel under the imagined weight of her unspoken thoughts. He found himself working longer hours, pushing himself harder, driven by an insatiable need to prove his worth, not to the world, but to the silent woman who watched him from across the dinner table. He designed bolder, more audacious structures, chasing an elusive perfection he believed would finally elicit the reaction he desperately craved from Lyra. A gasp of awe, a whispered word of adoration, a tangible acknowledgement of his brilliance. The more he strived, the more entrenched Lyra seemed in her contemplative quietude. He began to project his own self-doubt onto her. Her elegant posture, her thoughtful pauses, her serene expression, all became evidence of her silent judgment. He'd walk into a room and instantly feel her eyes on him, not with love, but with an imagined scrutiny that dissected his every flaw. He started to pick at his own appearance, his own words, convinced that he was constantly failing her unseen standards. His initial attempts to break her silence were clumsy, born of frustration. He'd bait her, "Are you even listening, Lyra?" Or, "Do you ever have an opinion?" Her responses were always measured, gentle, but to Julian's distorted perception, they only confirmed his fears. "Of course, Julian. I'm listening. Your work is truly remarkable." The very politeness of her words seemed to mock him, highlighting the emotional chasm between them. The climax of this silent battle came during a grand exhibition of his latest architectural marvel. The city's elite gathered, critics lauded his genius, and the champagne flowed freely. Julian stood at the center of it all, basking in the glow of public adulation. He sought Lyra in the crowd, finally spotting her, standing slightly apart, her eyes, as always, observing. He approached her, a desperate hope fluttering in his chest. "What do you think, Lyra?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of his deep need. She smiled, a soft, almost wistful expression. "It's magnificent, Julian, truly a testament to your vision." And then, she said nothing more. The simplicity, the lack of fervent praise, was like a cold splash of water on his burning ego. In that moment, surrounded by the clamor of his success, Julian felt utterly hollow. He realized, with a sickening jolt, that he had built this magnificent edifice not for his own fulfillment, but for Lyra's imagined approval, an approval that would forever elude him. His drive for external validation, fueled by his interpretation of her silence, had become a gilded cage. He had unconsciously turned her into the keeper of his self-worth, and her refusal to overtly validate him had driven him to exhaustion and a profound sense of inadequacy. The story's resolution began not with Lyra, but with Julian. He started to examine his own frantic need for external applause, his constant striving to fill an inner void with outward achievements. He began to explore the question, what if Lyra's silence isn't a judgment, but simply her way of being? What if her value isn't tied to how loudly she applauds me? This was the beginning of his journey towards individuation, detaching his self-worth from the perceived reactions of others. The man ensnared by the perceived judgment of a silent woman often grapples with a profound lack of self-worth, projecting his own insecurities onto her neutral observations. This is the classic trap of ego projection, where his internal doubts are mirrored back to him through her unspoken presence. The siren's secret here is not her deliberate withholding, but your own desperate need for external validation, which transforms her natural quietude into a weapon against your peace. To break free from this self-imposed torment, you must embark on a journey of shadow work, confronting the parts of yourself that crave constant applause and fear unacknowledged existence. Instead of seeking to elicit a reaction from her, turn your focus inward. Cultivate the stoic wisdom of self-sufficiency, understanding that true worth originates not from external praise but from internal integrity. Embrace the silence as an opportunity for introspection, a space to define your own values and celebrate your own achievements, independent of another's gaze. True empowerment comes when you realize that her silence is not a void to be filled by your anxieties, but a mirror reflecting your own need for individuation. When you cease to demand, you create the space for genuine connection to flourish, finding liberation in the quiet acceptance of who you are, without the desperate need for outward affirmation. Do you know how many women find their voice through the very act of withholding it, using silence not as a weapon, but as a sanctuary for their fragmented selves? This is the ultimate, most profound secret of the siren's quietude. It is not always a reflection of your inadequacy, but often a deeply personal journey of self-reclamation, a period of profound inner work where her silence is the chrysalis within which her truest self is reborn. The torment a man experiences is frequently his inability to understand this sacred, internal process, mistaking her withdrawal for a personal affront rather than a necessary act of individuation. In the sun-drenched coastal town of Elias, nestled between Emerald Hills and the Sapphire Sea, lived Arthur, a man of profound empathy and a heart too easily swayed by the needs of others. He was deeply devoted to his wife, Serafina, a woman whose spirit, once effervescent, had become increasingly muted over the years. Serafina had always been the life of any gathering, her laughter a melody, her words a constant stream of insightful observations. But subtly, almost imperceptibly, a change had begun. She would sit by the window for hours, gazing at the horizon, her expressions serene but distant. Her once frequent conversations became sparse, her responses clipped, yet never unkind. Arthur, who prided himself on his ability to connect with people, found himself utterly bewildered by this shift. He tried everything: thoughtful gifts, planned excursions, heartfelt questions about her day, her thoughts, her feelings. Each attempt, while received with a gentle smile and a quiet thank you, failed to break through the invisible veil that had descended upon her. He interpreted her growing silence as a sign of their failing connection, a testament to his inability to reach her. He began to feel a gnawing anxiety, a fear that he was losing her, not to another man, but to some profound sorrow he couldn't comprehend or alleviate. He started to meticulously recount their shared past, searching for a single misstep, a forgotten slight, a moment where he had inadvertently caused this withdrawal. His mind, usually so clear, became a labyrinth of self-recrimination. Had he not loved her enough? Had he been too busy with his work? Was he simply not enough for her? What Arthur couldn't see, blinded by his own loving concern and the pain of perceived rejection, was that Serafina was undergoing a profound internal transformation. Years of nurturing others, of constantly giving her energy and voice to the external world, had left her depleted. She had, for too long, suppressed her own deepest desires and needs, pushing them into the shadow of her being. Her silence was not a weapon against Arthur, but a necessary retreat, a period of shadow work where she was painstakingly piecing herself back together. She was learning to listen to the whispers of her own soul, the quiet urgings she had long ignored. Her stillness was a protective cocoon, allowing her to heal old wounds and realign with her authentic self. The climax of Arthur's torment came during their anniversary dinner. He had prepared a lavish meal, lit candles, and put on their favorite music, hoping to rekindle the spark that seemed to have faded. Serafina sat across from him, her beauty undiminished, yet her eyes held a faraway look. After a long, agonizing silence, Arthur finally broke. "Serafina," he pleaded, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Please, tell me what is wrong. Your silence. It's killing me." Serafina looked at him then, truly looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, her eyes held not distance, but a deep, profound tenderness mixed with a quiet strength. "Arthur," she began, her voice soft, almost melodic, "nothing is wrong with us. Something is being made right within me." She paused, gathering her thoughts, then continued. "For so long, I spoke every thought, reacted to every feeling, sought to make everyone comfortable, to solve every problem. I lost myself in the noise of the world, and in the noise of my own mind. This silence, my love, is not an absence. It is a presence. It is where I am finding myself again. It is where I am learning to listen to my own forgotten truths, to mend parts of me that I didn't even know were broken." Her words, delivered with such quiet conviction, were a revelation to Arthur. They shattered his ego projection, the belief that her silence was solely about him. He saw, then, not a woman withdrawing from him, but a woman bravely turning inward, engaged in a sacred act of self-discovery. His pain began to recede, replaced by a deep wave of understanding and reverence. He recognized the profound strength in her stillness, the courage required to disconnect from the external clamor and delve into the depths of one's own being. This was the ultimate liberation not only for Serafina, but for Arthur as well. He learned to respect her need for quiet, to find comfort in her presence even without words, understanding that her journey was not a rejection of him, but an affirmation of her own precious existence. He began his own journey of stoic acceptance, recognizing that true love means allowing another the space to be their authentic self, even when that self is quiet, even when that self is undergoing a metamorphosis. He stopped trying to fill her silence and began to simply be with it, and in that quiet communion, a deeper, more resilient connection began to form. The Siren's secret, then, is not a malicious trap but a profound teaching. Her silence, whether born of trauma, a need for introspection, or a quiet act of individuation, serves as a powerful mirror, reflecting back to you your own unaddressed fears, your need for external validation, and your unconscious shadow aspects. When a woman retreats into her inner world, it is not always an indictment of your worth, but often a necessary act of self-reclamation. To find peace in this dynamic, you must embrace the stoic wisdom of self-sufficiency. Let go of the frantic need to control or interpret her quietude. Instead, cultivate an inner stillness of your own. Allow her the sacred space for her journey, understanding that her silence is often her profound process of healing pain and emerging into her truest form. You are not responsible for her inner landscape, nor is her silence a statement about your value. True strength lies in your ability to sit with the unknown, to trust in the process of another's growth, and to realize that your own worth is an internal flame, needing no external wind to make it burn brighter. This is the ultimate rebirth, the power of stillness and the unwavering truth. Your peace resides not in her words, but in your own unshakable self-acceptance. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others to spread positive values in life. Thank you for listening. ND.